I'm an electrical and computer engineering student, and today I am presenting my honors thesis, Mentorship, Representation, and Persistence, Black Women's Experiences in Engineering and Technology. And this research really stemmed from my own experiences of being an engineering student, as well as a mixed method study which examined how Black women navigate in technical learning spaces, and ultimately what leads them to staying and thriving in these spaces. So engineering is part of nearly every aspect of modern day life, from communications to infrastructure to healthcare and so many other technologies that billions of people rely on a daily basis. The people who build these systems really matter, their experiences and their backgrounds, and really the problems they choose to prioritize really shapes what gets built and who it serves out in the world. Yet Black women are significantly underrepresented in these fields of work. But what's important to understand about this is that it's not always primarily a pipeline issue. STEM recruitment has increased more than ever, and so many students are entering in STEM and engineering fields. But the problem is not always entering, it's staying, and that gap between the two is where my research lives. So what I've gathered about retention is that it's less about what students bring in with them and more about what they encounter when they enter. The quality of support they're offered, and if they're able to build relationships with people further along in their field, or whether or not they look around a classroom or lab and see someone who looks like them in a position of authority or success. Why this matters in engineering and ECE. So less than 2% of engineering bachelor's degrees are awarded to Black women, and a field like electrical and computer engineering is so demanding and support gaps truly hit hard here. So we know that diverse teams produce stronger solutions, but when we have such a large number of underrepresentation, we have the field losing critical perspectives as well as many students losing their sense of community. Most diversity and recruitment efforts focus on getting students within the door, but what really happens when they're inside? That longevity of the students depends on who guides them, who leads them, and whether or not they feel like they belong. So that leads us to my problem statement and the research question: how do mentorship and representation influence persistence among Black women in engineering and technology? And this is where my thesis argument stems from. So these factors, such as structured mentorship combined with visible representation, improve academic confidence, belonging, and persistence for Black women in engineering and technology. So to really understand why students stay or leave, I drew on several frameworks. Tinto in academic and social integration, he says that students remain when they feel academically and socially connected to their field, and Strayhorn builds on this by saying belonging is shaped by how students interpret challenge, and that belonging is really the mechanism, and whether it's strong or weak is dependent on whether students stay or leave. And Bandura in self-efficacy theory says engineering identity grows through mastery and observing similar others succeed and mentor encouragement. And then Crispin Cruz in Mentorship in Higher Ed ties this into mentoring by saying it improves performance, career development, and belonging for those who are underrepresented. And I also tied this into some historical figures: Katherine Johnson, a NASA mathematician; April Erickson, an aerospace engineer at NASA; and Marion Croak, a telecommunications engineer. These Black women are proof that contributions have always been made by Black women in the STEM and engineering field, and the gap between contribution and recognition is really why visibility is so important today. So my research methodology focused on 3 phases. The first phase being the survey phase, which gathered demographic information and measured whether students had access to mentorship and people to guide them along the way, and whether or not they had intentions to continue within the field. And phase 2 were interviews. These were semi-structured interviews where students were able to describe their experiences in their field and really speak on if they were offered support or the lack of it, and how that helped them shape a decision. And phase 3 was STEMsational. STEMsational was an outreach event catered towards middle school and high school girls interested in STEM fields, where I was able to use different facilitation skills and engagement skills to really gauge how they interacted with the workshops. So my first major finding was that guidance is most effective when combined with direct academic support and consistent encouragement. The combination of these two not only change what students can do, but also how they perceive difficulty. So many participants in the surveys and interviews describe people such as advisors and near-peer mentors as people who broke down the unwritten rules, such as how and when to show up to office hours, how to prepare for technical interviews, and really how to advocate for yourself in team settings. So really before these students had this mentorship, they were often faced moments where they had difficult coursework, or they were in collaborative lab environments where they were constantly being evaluated, where it became hard for them and they started to question whether or not they belonged. And these are the moments where the mentor had the most impact, because the mentor really helps to reframe how they perceive difficulty. So instead of it seeming as a crucial setback to really build into the idea that they do not belong, it became part of the process, something for them to troubleshoot and work through, instead of something to add to their lack of confidence. So my finding too was that visibility had a positive effect on belonging and participation. And visibility had a long impact on participation and belonging, and the absence of it had real measurable effects how students showed up academically. So many students spoke about the feeling and the weight of being the only Black woman in the classroom or lab, and one participant described this as feeling like they were representing something that was bigger than themselves anytime they spoke up or had a technical opinion or wanted to be hands-on. And that's why it's so important to have Black women in these faculty roles and mentor roles, so students can actually see someone and envision themselves in engineering roles like they couldn't before, because they have these people to guide them along the way. So now for the last part of my research, the sensational portion. So as I mentioned, this was a outreach event for middle school and high school girls interested in STEM. And what I did was facilitate this event, as well as created 2 technical workshops for them to work through. One being a hands-on building exercise, and the second one being an AI computer exercise, which really taught them how computers work and that computers do not simply have brains, but the output that they give us is based on what we feed into them. And I really observed increased confidence when I saw that the girls were okay with making mistakes when I normalized it, and when it was just expressed as part of the process and for them to keep going, as well as when they saw someone in the place of authority and leading these workshops who looked like them. It opened them up so they can show more depth and ask more questions and really be more engaged overall in these workshops. And this whole STEM-stational outreach event really showed that whether students stay or leave in the engineering fields starts way before the collegiate level, and it really starts when students are young and engaged. So based on my findings, I offer 4 institutional recommendations. So first, to build structured guidance pathways that span the full academic journey, not just isolated events. And second, to strengthen visible representation through faculty recruitment, guest speakers, and support for students. And then third, to embed advising and near-peer support directly into high-stake technical coursework. And then fourth, to treat outreach as the beginning of a longer pipeline, not just something separate from what occurs inside the university. So in closing, guidance makes challenge manageable, and visibility makes success imaginable. Together, these are things that allow students to stay. This study shows that whether someone remains in engineering is not only an academic question, but a social and institutional one. When programs build these supports into their system rather than treating it as a separate thing, Black women are more likely to succeed and thrive in these spaces. Thank you. Any questions?
Do you have a reference slide?
No, not in PowerPoint.